All right, guys. How's everyone doing? Feeling fresh? Come on, guys. Everyone's sitting down. Everyone's relaxing. We got to kick it off. We got to get some energy here. Jeff said to make sure that we visualize everyone naked. It's a little bit awkward, but we're here. We're here. So Unity kind of asked us to come and talk about kind of what we had built and the studio that we'd built and how we did it. And so, we realized that one of the big things that's on kind of everyone's mind is, two major challenges for studios. There's funding, and then there's like finding a community for your game. And both of those are pretty tough, right? It's one of those things, especially in the climate of where we're at, it's tough to get people conviction on actually investing in your company. But I mean, if I'm honest, I think we've cracked the code. I think we've got a really interesting angle that we took on how we did it, and we're here to share that. So it really starts with this guy right here. So I'm going to kick it over to Simon, and he'll let us know how we did it.
Sure. So I guess 6 years ago yesterday, I actually started YouTube. I started to do content on a mobile game. I actually used to commute into London on a daily basis, and I was looking for a game that would scratch an itch of this sort of old nostalgia of MMOs that I used to like to play. And I started to do YouTube really as like a sideline hustle, hobby. And 3 months later, I was quitting my day job. So I used to be a sales director. I had like a pretty credible job with a big team. And yeah, in 3 months, I decided actually I'm going to follow my passion and do content on mobile games. It was really a year later than that I met this man, Dan, and we actually built that business into a brand. And we're able to build a website, hellhades.com, which Dan will tell you about in a second. And then I guess a year later than that, we decided actually we've got the means to build a studio with this great audience that really want us to do it. So perhaps Dan, lead in.
Yeah, so hi, I'm Dan. So I co-founded HH Gaming with Simon going on 5 years ago now. My background is digital marketing, so started building websites when I was about 11 years old and kind of did it professionally as soon as I was old enough to do that. Never in the gaming industry. I came from very corporate companies like Hilton Hotels. I used to run social media campaigns for and people like that. But during COVID lockdown, I picked up a mobile phone game called Raid Shadow Legends, and went looking for a content creator to kind of learn how to get the ropes of the game for, and stumbled across Simon. And he'd just kind of taken the step to really go full-time on YouTube and generate an income from it. And I saw the value and the connection that he had with the community was different to anyone else who was creating content in the space. So I reached out to him and said, look, what you've got here is the startings of a brand rather than just you as an individual creator. And if we just basically apply some of these more corporate mentalities towards the way that he's creating content, we can build a product which will really allow a community to thrive and grow. So we spent the first COVID lockdown basically building hellhades.com, which we launched in December 2020. The first month that we launched, we got over 1 million page views on the website. At that point, I handed in my notice, quit my job, and said, let's do this full on, let's put everything into it. During 2021, we were the fastest growing online gaming brand in the world. Built that website up to where it now gets between 12 and 15 million page views per month. We've got a community of about 500,000 registered members. And it was actually that community that reached out to us because we'd established ourselves in the space as being the go-to place for the Raid Shadow Legends community. Anyone else who wanted to create content or create a game that would come into that genre and launch into the Western market would come to us. They want to reach the audience, and the audience is using our tools and they're using our website. So yeah, that's basically how it led to us getting to the point where, financially as a company, we were doing very well. We'd expanded the team out to 13 full-time members of staff working on hellhades.com. And we started to explore, okay, what's next for us as a company? Where do we go from here? Do we want to be creating content in our 50s and 60s, sat in front of a camera on YouTube? Probably not. But more importantly, would people still want to watch us? So it's like, well, what's the natural next step for us? The community had reached out to us and said, well, you guys make all of this content and all of these guides and tools for other people's games. When are you going to make your own? And for a while, it was a pipe dream. And I guess as we became more comfortable as a company and we started to sort of realize that financially maybe we could afford this, we started toying with the idea of how would we do it if we wanted to. And we'd met Sham about a year before through his studio, which he'll explain about in a minute. And Simon and I both said, if we're going to do this, Sham's the only guy that we want to do it with. So we reached out to him to find out how much it would cost to make a game. A lot more than we thought.
A lot.
And yeah, so that's where Sham came into the picture. And I'll hand over to Sham.
To kind of push it back a little bit on my background, so I've always been kind of like an entrepreneur. Like I grew up in restaurants with my dad. I was a vet assistant when I was a kid. I ran martial arts dojos when I was like 13. All kinds of, basically always been a scrappy entrepreneur, and that kind of bled into my work when I basically decided that, hey, it was time for me to start a studio. Like I wanted to start a game studio, but originally it was for board games. And so I had an idea with my dad. We were always playing games together, and so we said, hey, let's start something. Let's make a company, and that was called Skeleton Hand, and that was at this point it's about 15 years ago. But yeah, I mean, it started out as a board game, and we did a couple successful Kickstarters. But it was always just like, it was me and a couple people that I had hired on, and maybe a little bit. I grew the team a little bit. We did a project, and we found a little bit of funding, and so this might sound familiar to some of you guys. I don't know what the backgrounds are here, but I feel like this is the story of a lot of groups where someone comes in, they have a great idea, they have a passion for something, and they get out there and they try to do it, and so that was my story for a long time, and actually, I was watching Simon. I was also playing Raid Shadow Legends to get inspiration, actually for the game I was making. It was called Incarnate, and I just loved Simon's energy, and I loved his connection. I felt like I was like hanging out with a buddy of mine, and so I cold reached out to him on Discord. Literally, I was like, "Hey man, I think you would dig my game. Let's talk about it." And he actually answered, right? And so that was a couple of years, but I think before we started Fateless. And so when the time came, and these guys said, hey, we've got this community that's saying we really want this game, we really like what you do, we really trust you. Do you want to build something? I was like, yeah, there's no question, of course. Like this is going to be a no-brainer for us, and that's I think where the story really starts. It's like we had all these people saying, here's exactly what we want, and here's how we want to be a part of that. And so we said, well, what do? You give the people what they want. And so, kick it over to Simon.
Yeah, so I guess we sat down for a long time, actually, and understood what do we actually need to be able to do to build our game? What does it look like? What level of quality are we trying to hit? For us, it's a hero collector like a Raid Shadow Legends, so it's how many characters, what art style, what fidelity, and we started to do the numbers. What does it actually mean in terms of the cash we need to raise to be able to start this game? And we actually came up with a number of $4 million. We thought that would be the sort of starting point to really give us the foundations to get to metrics and be able to then ramp up from there. So we actually decided to try and raise $6 million. Now,
just to be safe.
I'm going to be honest, I've never raised before that moment in my life, and I was just like, how is it even feasible that you can raise that amount of cash? It just felt like it was a pipe dream, really, at that point. And we thought we'd have to go down the route of talking to VCs, gaming VCs, strategics, family offices, and really try and garner their interest in and belief in us. What I actually did was I put out a video on my YouTube channel and said, you've asked for it and it's coming. We're starting Fateless. And within a week, we had over 100 emails inbound of people saying, is there an opportunity to invest in this project? We really believe in what you've already done. And it was unbelievable, really. In 10 weeks, we raised $6 million from this group in an equity-priced round. So not a Kickstarter, it was actually a priced equity round. But what's really interesting is the conversations were so positive. And I say I came from sales as a previous background. I might send 100 emails outbound to try and get some interest, and maybe you end up having 10 meetings from those 100 emails if you've done well. Well, this was completely opposite. So we had this group, we were almost trying to filter out who's actually worthwhile for what we need, and then having these conversations around potential investment. Everybody was already really warm to us. So we weren't trying to break that initial barrier of, do you believe in the team? It was actually a case of, we already know the team, we really believe in you guys, and it's like, so tell us what the vision is, tell us what you're actually trying to achieve, and then we'll decide whether or not we're going to invest. And actually, I think we had like a 95% investment rate out of people we spoke to that we wanted to be part of that group. So we ended up raising the $6 million through about 40 or so shareholders, investors. And yeah, I mean, it really gave us like this belief in what we were building. And then the next phase, when we were looking at our seed round, we were looking to raise $8 million, which is only ended a few months ago, really, about 6 months ago now. And that was to take us through to our early access launch, and then that kind of like push really for user acquisition. Yeah. And again, we thought we were going to have to change tact and go to VCs, and start to really sort of change our path. And in fact, we tried that. A lot of the VCs in the market right now are saying, well, until you've got metrics, until we can see if your monetization strategies are really working, actually, that's just not going to work for us. So really like what you guys are doing. We love this community aspect that you've got, but that's still not enough for us to come in wholesale and invest. And it was probably a couple of months actually into that process. We were like, well, why don't we just go back to our roots and take the same tack that we did with the first round? And again, we ended up raising $8 million, primarily through first round investors coming back in with actually higher amounts. And we were able to, I guess, be pretty scrappy with the way we attend events and make sure that we really connect with as many people that we can. And from those connections, it's then that onward connection. And eventually, you start to really build this network of people that really believe in what you're doing. And I think that's been essential for us. So this kind of like community we've bought from past, but also this community we've built in this space. We've just extended what we do. So yeah, I guess really what that gave us was this massive unfair advantage. So we've been able to raise capital, and unlike anyone else really I've spoken to when we've been around these various events, we've had then this organic growth within our company. Basically, content creators that are looking to replicate what Dan and I had done at HH Gaming. They're trying to do the same thing already with Godforge, our first release, because they're trying to get ahead of the pack, really. So we've got over 100 organic content creators doing content on our game, which doesn't actually exist yet. It's due to launch in February. And, we did an alpha experience, and we've just never seen such growth in terms of like a community following all of those videos, all of those creators, and joining things like our Discords. So it's really given us the ability to have all of these unfair advantages around launch. So we've got ready-made creators, we've got which we haven't paid for, and obviously, we've only got so many dollars in the bank that most of that is put aside to create the game. When you're then doing your user acquisition, you're obviously going to try and pull some creators in to push your game. Well, we've already got a load of people doing that, and they've got a lot of credibility already. And and that's really built into us having a decent YouTube following, decent social media following. And I guess really it's a new way of trying to build the company before the game's actually released.
Yeah.
You, Dan.
So we knew that the old way of kind of building studios and building games was not going to work for us. The whole reason that we even existed in the first place was this community. So what we couldn't do was what historically a lot of companies do, is they announce, oh, we're going to make a game, or they don't even announce it. They go into the dark, they build it, they develop it, and sort of everything behind the scenes. Nothing gets shared until they're ready to go live. And then at that point, they hope that there's an audience which will like the game. They hope that people will kind of pick it up and flow with it. But we knew that wouldn't work for us. What we wanted to do was actually bring our community along for the ride with us. So from day one, from Simon's channel, creating that first video saying Fateless is born, we spun up a YouTube channel specifically for Fateless. And since that day, every week, 2 days of the week, we've put out a podcast every week. And we've also put a video out. And in those videos, we're not hiding things. We're sharing the ups, the downs, everything of the journey with the community. So not only are they bought into Godforge as a game in terms of seeing the development of it from day one, They're bought into the community. They know who the individuals are who are working on the project. We have our art director come on and show some of the art and concept that we're working on that week. We have our designers come and talk about mechanics that we're going to be having in the game. We have other people from outside of the industry who have got experience coming in and talking to us about how they sort of tackle different things on the podcast, which has given our audience this really kind of connected feeling to the studio. So they've got this emotional attachment to not only the content and the game that we're creating, but us as a studio as a whole and things like that. So they've been incredibly supportive. It's been great because since obviously the first round that we raised, we then delivered on all of those promises that we said we were going to in that first raise. So when we went in for the second raise, we said, okay, well, we've now got to the game to the point where we're ready to test it. We know how much we're going to need to get to the next step and really take it to a wider audience. Everybody who we were approaching and speaking to, they've already been following us, and they can look back at the history and say, okay, these guys didn't just go into hiding and come back and say, oh, we've run out of money, we need to do X, Y, and Z. You know, we've delivered on everything along the way, and they know that because they've been along for the journey with us. So unlike really any other games within our genre, we're going live right now with 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and they're just organic people who have come along. At the initial push, we probably got about 30,000 from our kind of core following, but really over time that's kind of grown over the past 2 years with the consistency of content. Obviously it helps that we've got a background in content creation. We know what works on the algorithm, and we know how to sort of do these clickbait titles and thumbnails and stuff, but you know, Simon pulling faces and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
but it's and that's actually one thing that I wanted to make sure that people here took away, is that what we did is not unique to us. It's repeatable, it's anyone can do it, and it's taking that risk of sharing things with your audience and the people who are interested in what you're doing before you go to market. That way you have time to pivot if you need to. You can take feedback along the way. Obviously you don't need to listen to all of the negative feedback, but you know, it is there to keep you interested. But also it connects with the community and makes them feel that they're a part of the journey.
So I guess one of the things we did, which was really exciting for us, we launched an alpha. We actually launched it in July. And this was the first time our community actually came in to really play test the game. So we had around we had about 50,000 people sign up as potential alpha testers. Again, all organic as people that had followed our content. We invited 35,000 of those along to play. And actually they all showed up. And again, this is just, blew my mind, honestly, the amount of engagement we had. So we had 97% of them actually say they would come and play the game on release. We had 55% day 7 retention for an alpha. And again, it was a pretty unpolished experience. We had close to 90% said they would actually recommend Godforge to friends. We had over 7 hours average playtime per day per user for a 7-day period. So our metrics were just kind of off the charts. Again, this comes from this almost like, I guess, this passion now that they've got for this game that they've seen grow over the last couple of years, and they felt like they're a part of the development process. It's actually led to a number of other things as well, which have been really beneficial for our studio. So we've got a QA army, and they're actually some of the experts from the genre that come in free because they really want to do this, and they play test different features, they play test different heroes that we make, and see how they kind of like sync with other heroes in the game. And actually, it's a benefit that you can't really buy in terms of a QA team because their knowledge is just so great, and their experience is so vast in this space. And I mean, we've got a number of people doing this, and we've got so many more that want to do it. So it's just a real, again, it's another unfair advantage, I guess, but it just kind of like shows when you get this kind of like buy-in from a group, you know, that they're really keen to then help you push a game out to that next level and hit the quality bar that you want to hit. We've also got this kind of like content creator outreach or amplification of the game. So it's not just a case of content creators producing content for that community. It's actually how do they bring their communities along as well, and you know, by natural sort of growth, we start to spread. which gives us a huge advantage.
So I guess at this point, we want to talk about recommendations, right? Things that we've learned and we think that people can replicate, as Dan said and Simon said. Back when I ran Skeleton Hand, I knew I needed a face and a voice, right? So I'm not charming enough to go on YouTube and actually talk to people.
I think you're underselling yourself.
Okay,
You're pretty good at it.
But in all seriousness, you need someone who can represent your brand authentically, right? That can build the trust of an audience and that really is passionate about exactly what you're doing. And I think that if you can find someone that can fill that role, that can do that for you, it's going to be so I didn't really realize how much it was gonna affect our ability to do everything that we wanted to do, but I would say that it's probably the #1 factor. I mean, what Simon and Dan have built and what other people can build, which is just trust and connection with the community. It can't be it can't be undersold. Basically, it's incredible. I would say the other big thing to think about is that gaming is pretty commoditized these days. It's becoming much easier, through AI and just like tools that make things easier. So it's really, I don't want to say easy, but it's much easier to make a good game. And so how do you differentiate? How do you connect with people? Like it comes back to that person with trust. You need to have somebody to be able to represent you and to show that what you're doing is something special and it's something that they want to be involved in. And so, I'd say that's #1. Find someone who can represent your brand and is very much trusted, right? The other thing is that VCs and other groups, they're always requiring metrics before deploying capital. So how do you get metrics? You don't have any metrics. You didn't put your game out. No one knows if your game is going to be fun or not. Well, if you have a big community, if you have a big Discord, if you have a big YouTube following or TikTok or whatever it is, it's much easier to sell that story, to tell people that hey, we've got not just an idea, we have a movement. We have people that are really energized and interested in what we're doing. I would say the other thing is and again, I don't know your guys' particular background, but if you're a smaller dev, you don't need millions of dollars or millions of people rather. You just really want 10 or 100 people that really care about what you're doing. And then you cultivate that, right? And you spend the time and kind of like what we did, where we just kept putting out videos. We put out another video. You talk about another thing that you're doing. You talk about a challenge that you had. You engage with people in comments, and just over time, it builds. It really does. A 30,000 person start is a good start, but it grows to a point where it's there's a critical mass, and it can make have a big dent in when you're trying to bring in more users, bring more players, right? Whether you're a live service game and you need to have a continuous flow of players, or if you're a game where you're just going to come out and you want to get as many people to buy your game, it doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. You want as many people to have eyes on it that have an interest in what you're building. So, share what you're building. That's another thing that I guess was key to our success. It's easy to say, oh, this has to be perfect before I put it out. It has to be exactly the feature that I want, exactly the polish level. Those of you that are artists out there, you resonate with this. It's so easy to get wrapped up in that perfect, letting perfect be the enemy of good. You just got to get it out there. You got to get it in front of people. You got to get that feedback, because you can iterate faster and you can do better, and you're going to end up with a better product for everybody. So, yeah. And then I guess the last one that we have down here that is I think super important is making those feedback loops really easy. So when you put it out there, if you just put it out there and then you just don't pay attention to it, and you don't take that feedback and you actually make something out of it, make those changes, make those adjustments, people aren't going to come back and actually keep commenting, right? So you have to show that you do care about what's happening. So whether that's it, Simon will sometimes do videos where he just takes all the comments from the last one, or all the different questions, and he'll answer those questions and talk about how he feels or how we feel about this comment or this feedback, and why we did or didn't do the thing that this player wanted us to do. And that really gets people invested. That makes people feel like they're a part of the community, they're a part of the journey, they're a part of the company, and that's invaluable.
And it's worth saying, with real honesty and integrity, you answer those questions, because sometimes it's not going to be the answer that someone wants to hear. But as long as they understand the reasoning behind that, actually it makes a big difference. So we found that having those sort of Q&A sessions are actually really valuable, just to sort of feedback actually both the positive things we're going to change because we've heard really cool suggestions, but also things we won't change, or we're going in a certain different direction, and there's a reason for that. And so as long as people understand what that reason is, actually they're really malleable to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, like, this all sounds like really nice, and like that everything was so easy, and it was very, everything was just
it's one of the
handed to
favorites,
us.
by the way.
Yeah. This is fun now.
You guys have seen that before, but it wasn't always easy, right? So you have to prototype fast, you have to find the fun, and then you have to pivot when it's required. And like, I'll tell you guys a story about something that happened directly to us, right? So we thought we had a great combat system. We were like, this is it. Everyone's going to love this. This is going to be the best combat system ever. It's going to be really strategically deep and stuff like that. And we had gone too far. It was too complex, and we were showing it off as we were doing, as we did, and we just got this feedback that people were like, this feels complicated. This feels difficult. This feels hard. And again, we had gone pretty far with this at this point. We had developed this feature. We'd done a bunch of complex math. We had built up all these Confluence sheets about how you design characters and stuff like that. Got really complex. So it was pretty heart-wrenching for me personally when we had to make this. This is the honest truth.
Yeah.
We had to make this change. But when we made that change, right, that feedback came directly from the community, and then we really sat back and we said, okay, hold on, let's put ourselves in their shoes, really in our shoes, right? What are they trying to say here? Right, and a lot of it wasn't that they didn't want the depth that we had gone to, that they didn't want the complexity. They didn't want this to be basically a tactical game. They wanted it to be something that it was a little bit lighter, but then the strategy kind of came at a different layer. And again, that only relates to the way we did it. But this is about, lesson learned here. If we had prototyped faster, if we had gotten that feedback earlier, it wouldn't have cost us so much. And we learned that for the next round, for the next things. The other thing is MVP is a moving target, right? So it's easy, again, going back to what we had talked about earlier, where you think that this has to be perfect, but you really want to think about what is MVP, minimum viable product. What is the first thing that I can get out to people that is really going to be compelling enough that I can start to get some of that data to understand where people are interested in spending their time, where they are not interested in spending their time. Is this, again, for us, what's the core loop? Is the core loop, compelling enough that people are going to be interested? That's why we did the alpha test, right? It was, we did it in this really interesting way where we said, okay, so our game is an RPG hero collector. Tons and tons of different systems. There's a campaign mode, and there's dungeon mode, and there's boss battles, and there's hundreds of characters and weapons and all kinds of different layers, right? But we said, okay, how can we test all those systems without giving away everything that we had done? And so we basically ended up making this, we call it the Caverns of Chaos, is that right?
Yeah.
The Caverns of Chaos, 150 levels with 151st level that you could fight endlessly. And we basically built in these little, every 30 levels, there were 30 level blocks where they had mini economies. And so we just got really creative about it. I mean, and it was something else that we really learned from it was that players love that. They asked for it to come back. So we found a mode that we basically would never have really considered by doing the thing that we wanted to do, which was getting to that MVP, to understanding what we were doing right, what we were doing wrong, how can we change it, how we could adjust it as quickly as possible. So for whatever game you're making, think about how you can do that. And then going back to what you said, it's be honest and be transparent, right? So when you do make a mistake, or when you have something where you want to make a change, as long as you're honest and you're transparent about why and what you're going to do to fix it, or how you're going to make the change in the future and not make the mistake in the future, people love that. I mean, it feels good to have someone be honest with you and not to be hiding information from you and trying to say oh well no we didn't do that. You didn't see anything here, nothing to see here. That's not what people want, and I think it feels like an obvious thing to say, but I do think that it needs to be said, if you know what I mean.
You actually start to get this squad of defenders as well. So that if people are asking questions or critical of a certain thing, suddenly your community, which have basically already seen these answers, already asked these type of questions, they'll actually come in and start to moderate for you. They'll start to engage for you. And you feel like, I'm just going to dive in and answer some of these questions, and they're already being answered. And you're just kind of like, great. It's just kind of like backup of community over everything you're doing because they've just really bought into you as a team. So you almost get a few misses which go almost unseen because you've got people that have got your back and they really feel a part of the project.
Yeah, so I guess all this builds up to the point that we understood and what we put to action is that you really need to understand your community. You need to understand the niche that you're creating, I guess, a project for. But not just like know it. I mean, really actually invest yourself in it. We looked at data of the age, the demographic, where people live, who are the type of people that are actually investing in these games. And I guess for us, it was perfect because we are these type of people. We are just an extension of the people that we're creating this game for. But we weren't shooting in the dark. We knew, as I said, like the age bracket. And, the games that we're creating, they're for an older age bracket. They're, really our audience starts at 35 and goes all the way up. We've got people in their 70s that play these type of games. And in addition to that, we also know that they come from a background or a world where they played games like World of Warcraft and RuneScape and things like that, but they have grown up, they have kids, they have jobs, they don't necessarily have the time that they used to be able to have to spend investing in PC gaming. So they want that buzz, that vibe of being a part of a guild, completing content together, but they turn to their mobile phone to pick it up now. So, so really understand what are the motivating factors for your niche and the audience within it, and then communicate with them authentically. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and be in front of the camera, and just kind of connect with them on a personal level. And then the final factor is just put the community first. I think, yes, you can spend money on marketing and pull people in, but unless you're investing really in the quality of retention and giving them reasons to engage with you as a studio or as a project as a whole, it doesn't create that long-term feeling. At the end of the day, humans by nature, we're pack animals. We want to be a part of a group, even so much as everybody coming to an event like this is to meet other people who share similar interests and things like that. And that's what you're effectively doing. You're creating a game for people out there on the internet or, sat at their home or, traveling to work, and they want to be able to pick something up and connect with other people who enjoy the same things as them. So, yeah. Obviously, we'd love to continue the conversation, and I think Sham's going to open it up to some Q&A. But yeah, I really appreciate everybody being here to listen, and yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
So.